The Indian River Land Trust is committed to the health of the Indian River Lagoon. Studies that look at seagrasses, birds, fish, diamondback terrapins, and even water quality really give us a lot more information about the lands that we're protecting and how they can help to protect the lagoon. The ladies of the lagoon and the Indian River Lagoon Council, which is part of the National Estuary Program, have been kind enough to fund a new study that is ongoing on several of the conservation lands that the Land Trust owns. And the aim of that is really to try to boost the fish populations in the lagoon. Before we get into the particulars about the fish study, we wanted to give you some context about some of the important site features that we have here on the conservation lands that we'll be discussing.
Up and down the lagoon until about the 1940s, the natural transition between land and sea was actually quite blurred in a stunning wetland environment, that of a tidal salt marsh. Unfortunately, tidal salt marshes are the perfect breeding ground for the salt marsh mosquito, which likes to lay its eggs on the exposed mud of the marsh interior. This makes them rather inhospitable to live nearby. So in the 1950s and 60s, mosquito control districts up and down the lagoon began impounding salt marshes by building earthen dikes, which allowed them to flood the interiors, thus reducing the mosquito breeding grounds. This was done on over 2,000 acres of coastal salt marsh along the lagoon. At the time, science had yet to inform us about how important the natural transition is between land and sea for the overall ecosystem health. It wasn't until after the substantial land modifications had been made that we learned about salt marsh functions, such as filtering pollutants, buffering against storm surge, sequestering carbon, and harboring an incredible diversity of animal species, including juvenile snook and tarpon. While the impoundments have proven successful in helping to manage the mosquito population, the loss of the original habitat has had far-reaching consequences. So here at Bee Gum Point Preserve, we're studying the ripple effect.
One of the biggest concerns about habitat loss in Florida is the effect it has on fisheries. So it was great when we had the opportunity to work with Indian River Land Trust to figure out how to make bee gum a better fish habitat. And our work on snook and tarpon in Charlotte Harbor in southwest Florida showed us that the more connected mangroves were to the estuary, the better habitat it was. And so the project we worked on a few years ago and we're working on now is figuring out the best way to modify mosquito impoundment control procedures to maximize the effectiveness of this habitat for juvenile tarpon and snook. When we catch the fish, we put small computer chips into them, into their abdominal cavities. And those chips are just like the transponder that's on your car for the automatic toll booth system. And we construct underwater antenna at the culverts that connect the lagoon to the impoundment. So every time a tagged fish swims through that antenna, it gets detected, just like your car driving through the toll booth. And that way we can tell how many fish survive, how many are able to leave. Around 80 to 85% of the mangroves that still exist are inaccessible to fish because they're impounded. So having the land trust that understands the importance of connecting these habitats is huge.
It's incredible to think that the great tarpon, also known as the Silver King, which can grow to be 300 pounds and attract anglers from around the world to fight these magnificent fish which have the capability of towing around a vessel, grow up in these impoundments the size of a ribbon in such a vulnerable state. The Land Trust is doing everything we can to protect these critical habitats to provide those fishing experiences for future generations to come.